we are. It's been a cold few days. I'll be happy when I can only imagine how cold it might be where some of you are. Tonight we're going to be going to reply to Yasaburo on page 117. Okay, it's the Go Shows actually on volume 1, page. Yorimoto is not Yasaburo. Page 827. Okay, everybody's with me?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and start then. Everybody's ready for me to get started. Let me kill this coffee and I'll read. Dude, I'm about ready to fall over, so. Yeah, no clue. Here we go.
Yep.
All right, page 827 of volume 1, reply to Yasaburo. I suggest, pardon me, I'm supposed to read the background first, I would know. All right, the background, page 829. This letter was written at Minobu to the believer Yasaburo. One explanation identifies Yasaburo with a man named Saito Yasaburo, who lived in Numazu in Suruga province. The wording of the last paragraph suggests that he may have been a samurai. Yasaburo had evidently sought the Daishonin's advice in preparation for an upcoming debate with a priest of the Pure Land school. This letter is the Daishonin's reply. It can be roughly divided into two parts. The first and the longer part outlines the general argument that the Daishonin suggests Yasaburo should present in debating with a follower of the Pure Land school. The second, beginning from now, is if that priest objects, instructs Yasaburo in how to press his opponent on specific points and urges him to muster up a resolute spirit. The letter states that only Shakyamuni possesses the three virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent with respect to the people of this Sahe world. Everybody understands that statement, right? Okay. In the Daishonin's day, due to the growing influence of the Pure Land school, people tended increasingly to place their trust in Amida Buddha of the Western paradise, hoping to win rebirth in his Pure Land after death. But the Daishonin stressed the importance of reverence for Shakyamuni, the historical founder of Buddhism, who actually appeared in this world. Here he asserts that to worship Amida and slight Shakyamuni is an act of utter disloyalty. Thus, though the believers in Amida may seem to be devoted to pious acts, they are in fact guilty of an offense far worse than that of impious men with no religious awareness whatsoever. Their grave error, the Daishonin says, is bringing disaster on the country in the form of famine, epidemics, and the impending Mongol invasion. Okay, everybody's with us so far, right? So go back 3 pages to page 827, and we'll start with the Gosho now. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Reply to Yasaburo, page 827, first column. I suggest you begin with religious debate with these words. Although I am an ignorant layman, among the teachings I have heard, I was especially impressed by the passage in the second volume of the Lotus Sutra that reads, "Now this threefold world is all my domain." This sutra passage means that this country of Japan is the domain of Shakyamuni Buddha. In addition to the facts that all the gods, such as the Sun Goddess, Great Bodhisattva Hachiman, and Emperor Jimmu, and all the people from the ruler of the nation on down dwell within his realm, he is the Buddha to whom we living beings are greatly indebted for 3 reasons. First, he is our sovereign. Second, he is our teacher. Third, he is our father. Among all the Buddhas of the 10 directions, only Shakyamuni Buddha is endowed with these 3 virtues. Therefore, even if all the people of the country of Japan were to serve Shakyamuni Buddha wholeheartedly, just as they now do Amida Buddha, if they were to place him side by side with another Buddha and treat him in the same manner, that would still be a grave error. For example, though someone were our own ruler and wise besides, if we were to shift our allegiance to the ruler of another country, for instance, if, while dwelling in Japan, we were to pay honor to the king of China or Koryo, and slight the sovereign of Japan, could we be called persons who honor the great sovereign of this country? This is all the more true in the case of the priests of Japan, who without exception have shaved their heads and donned their robes as disciples of the thus come one Shakyamuni. They are not the disciples of Amida Buddha. However, priests who have no halls in their temples where Shakyamuni is enshrined or where the Lotus Sutra meditation is practiced, and who have neither painted nor wooden images of Shakyamuni, nor even a copy of the Lotus Sutra, have set aside Shakyamuni Buddha, who is fully endowed with the three virtues. In each district, village, and household throughout the country, they have erected more images than there are people of Amida Buddha, who possesses not a single one of these virtues. And they chant the name of Amida Buddha exclusively, 60,000 or 80,000 times a day. Although such acts appear to be most admirable, when we view the matter in light of the Lotus Sutra, we find that these good people are guilty of offenses heavier than those of wicked men who daily commit the 10 evil acts. Evil people do not rely on any Buddha whatsoever, so they cannot be accused of disloyalty. Moreover, if they should become good people, they might even devote themselves to the Lotus Sutra. Yet it is difficult to imagine that the people of Japan could ever turn their hearts with more seriousness and affection toward Shakyamuni Buddha than Amida Buddha, or toward the Lotus Sutra than the Nimbutsu. Thus, they are evildoers who only resemble virtuous people. And among evildoers, they are the worst of the most terrible slanderers and ichkantikas, or persons of incorrigible disbelief in Alajapavipa. And with regard to such people, Shakyamuni Buddha declared in the second volume of the Lotus Sutra, when his life comes to an end, he will enter the Avicii hell. The priests of Japan today are all men of great evil, surpassing even Devadatta or the Venerable Kokalika. And because lay people revere them and make them offerings, the country is being transformed before our very eyes into the hell of incessant suffering, where countless people in their present existence, in addition to undergoing starvation, pestilence, and horrible agonies unknown in previous ages, will be attacked by a foreign power. This is due solely to the workings of the deities like Brahma, Chakra, and the gods of the sun and the moon. In all Japan, I alone understand why such things are happening. At first, I pondered whether or not I should speak out. Yet, what was I to do? Could I turn my back on the teachings of the Buddha, who is father and mother to all living beings? Resolving to bear whatever might befall me, I began to speak out. And in these more than 20 years, I have been driven from my dwelling, my disciples have been killed, and I have been wounded, exiled twice, and finally was nearly beheaded. I spoke out solely because I had long known that the people of Japan would meet with great suffering, and I felt pity for them. Thoughtful persons should therefore realize that I have met these trials for their sake. If they were people who understood their obligations or who were capable of reason, then out of 2 blows that fall on me, they would receive 1 in my stead. But far from it. Rather, they arouse hatred toward me, which is something I cannot understand. And lay people, not having heard the truth, either drive me from my dwelling place or hate my disciples. It is beyond my comprehension. For example, even if unwittingly we mistook our parents for enemies and reviled or struck and killed them, how could we avoid the guilt of that offense? These people, failing to recognize their own rudeness, seem to think that I am rude. They are like a jealous woman who, with furious eyes, who, unaware that when she glares at a courtesan, her own expression is disagreeable, instead complains that the courtesan's gaze is frightening. Explain that these things have happened solely because the ruler has failed to inquire about the Buddhist doctrines, and that the reason no inquiry has been made is that the people of the country are guilty of so many offenses that their evil karma has destined them unfailingly to be attacked by a foreign country in this lifetime and to fall into the hell of incessant suffering in the next. And please add something along these lines. I believe this is because it is clearly recorded in the sutras. Even though you may attack and threaten insignificant persons like ourselves or drive us from our homes, in the end you will never get away with it. The resolve of this priest is such that it is most unlikely that even the sun goddess or great bodhisattva Hachiman can make him obey, let alone ordinary persons. That is why we hear that he has never quailed, even in the face of repeated persecutions, but has instead become all the more firmly determined. Now, if that priest objects, and of course he's speaking of himself. Now, if that priest objects, then respond by asking if what you have just said is a distorted view. Ask him whether or not the Lotus Sutra contains a passage stating that Shakyamuni Buddha is our parent, our teacher, and our sovereign. If he answers that it does, demand to know if a passage exists stating that Amida Buddha is his parent, sovereign, and teacher. Yes or no? If he replies that such a passage exists, insist on knowing whether or not he has two fathers. But if he says that no such passage exists, then demand to know how, having abandoned his parent, he could treat another person well. In addition, you should assert that the Lotus Sutra in no way resembles the other sutras, quoting the passage, "In these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth." If he attempts to cite the passage, "She will immediately go to the world of peace and delight," then demand to know if he admits that he is at a loss to reply to your question. If he admits this, then you should further explain the meaning of this passage. You must be firmly resolved, he's saying to Yasaburo. You must be firmly resolved. If you're going to go defend the Lotus Sutra, if you're going to tell somebody about Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, you're going to profess to know the correct teaching in the latter day, you must be firmly resolved. You cannot show weakness or fear or doubt about the things that you're trying to convey to others. You've got to say them like you know and they don't. You must be firmly resolved. Do not begrudge your fief. Okay, so what's he saying there? Don't be worried about loss as a result of your faith. Don't begrudge. If you're hearing that they're going to take away your personal property because you're my disciple, go for it. Do your worst. Tell them that. Don't ever act coiled or afraid. Okay? That's the opposite of the manner in which you should address them. And the way to victory is to address them with that assuredness and that confidence in the law. Okay? Your prayer never goes unanswered. That's what you can always count on.
Yes.
All right? So you must be firmly resolved. Do not begrudge your fief. Do not think of your wife and children. Wow, that sounds cold. It's not at all. Why is it not cold? You must be firmly resolved. Do not begrudge your fief. Do not think of your wife and children. And do not depend on others. That's what he's basically saying. Don't think about anything other than attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime. If you really want to help your wife, if you really want to help your children, if you really want to help your nation, if you want to help your ruler, attain Buddhahood in this lifetime. That's the best thing you can do for everybody around you.
Right.
That's what he's saying. Okay, let me say it again. You must be firmly resolved. In other words, that's doubt-free faith.
Right.
Do not begrudge your fief, which is the same as saying, do not begrudge your life, right?
Right.
Do not think of your wife and children, and do not depend on others. You must simply make up your mind. You must simply make up your mind. That's really what this is all about. When we simply make up our mind that we're not going to let devilish function stop us any further and we're going to attain Buddhahood in this lifetime, we can, and we do. But you have to come up with that resolve, and then you have to guard it day by day, moment by moment. You can't go back. Once you've crossed that Rubicon to say, I'm the Buddha, you're screwed if you if you roll over on that.
Right.
Okay? So it's a huge vow. It's a huge determination to make, but it's one that's absolutely correct and that we're encouraged throughout the entire teaching to finally grasp within the course of our life. You must simply make up your mind. Look at the world this year as a mirror. The reason that you have survived until now when so many have died was so that you would meet with this affair, this opportunity to propagate the teaching. This is where you will cross the Uji River. This is where you will ford the Seta, which are both references to like crossing the Rubicon. Once you cross these points, there's no going back. This will determine whether you will win honor or disgrace your name. Okay? But what's he speaking of there, though? This is what is meant when it is said that it is difficult to be born as a human being, that it is difficult to believe in the Lotus Sutra. You should pray intently. The Shakyamuni many treasures and all the Buddhas of the 10 directions will gather and enter into your body. That's the wisdom of the Buddhas. Enter into your body to assist you. If you happen to be summoned before the steward, you should first explain all of this thoroughly. With my deep respect, Nichiren, 4th day of the 8th month of the 3rd year of Kenji, cyclical sign, Hino to Ushi, replied to Yasaburo. So did you catch what that was saying, though? Let me read that last full paragraph one more time, because it's the whole key to everything. You must be firmly resolved. I'm not talking to Yasaburo now. I'm talking to you guys. You must be firmly resolved. Do not begrudge your life. Do not think of your family or others as being more important than your salvation as becoming a Buddha. See, that's the whole thing. You can't let the love and the fear of other people not understanding what you're doing keep you from doing what you're supposed to be doing. Do you understand? That's why he's saying, do not think of your wife and children. Do you really think he's saying, don't give a shit about your wife and children? That's not what he's saying. He's saying, don't let anything make you hesitate. Right. Don't let anything be the source of you stopping the most vital thing you can do for everyone. If you do that, then you don't have to worry about all this other stuff. That's what he's saying. Okay. Look at the world this year as a mirror. We should every day. The reason that you have survived into now, when so many have died, was that you would meet with this affair. This is where you will cross the Uji River. This is where you will ford the Seta. This will determine whether you win honor or disgrace your name. This is what is meant when it is said that it is difficult to be born as a human being, and that it is difficult to believe in the Lotus Sutra. Because you're going to have to go through all this if you're going to believe in the Lotus Sutra, right? You're going to meet difficulties. You're going to have obstacles. You're going to meet the 3 powerful enemies, okay? You should pray intently that Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions will all gather and enter into your body to assist you. If you happen to be summoned before the steward, and I've already read that. Okay, so going on to the lecture. That was clear, right? Did you understand the gist of what he's saying there?
Yes.
Okay, so this is actually a follow-on Gosho to last week's Gosho, the workings of Brahma and Chakra. Okay, so do you remember what the workings of Brahma and Chakra were basically expressing to us? Okay, to have doubt-free faith. To have faith that no prayer goes unanswered, okay? To never be to never be frightened or fear the things that you experience in this life as long as you're chanting Daimoku to the Gohonzon. They're all part of what you promised to fulfill as your mission as it relates to expressing the proof of the power of the law. So that means that you have to take on all that stuff all the time. If we go back through that last Gosho, go back to workings of Brahma and Chakra, giving fatherly advice and encouragement to Najo Tokimitsu. This time it's the same thing, only he's doing it with Yasaburo, right? Devilish functions obstructing Buddhist practice. That's what he's going to be talking about here again. Making unceasing efforts to strengthen our faith. Confronting difficulties with delight, not misunderstanding obstacles for being something bad, but viewing them always as opportunities to validate the power of the law. So everybody's with me. This is going to flow into last week. Okay? So, we've already read the Gosho. We'll start now on page 119. All right. On October 17th, 1957, 55 years ago this month, in October 2012, when this was written, I went to Osaka to appear in court for the first session of the trial related to the so-called Osaka incident. In July of that year, I had been falsely accused of election law violations, for which I was arrested and held in custody for questioning. Although I had committed no crime, the Osaka District Public Prosecutor's Office decided to charge me. My struggle in the courts facing off against the devilish nature of authority to prove my innocence and set the record straight was about to begin. Because it was anticipated that the trial would continue for an extended period, I would probably be traveling to Osaka more than I had previously. My wife, therefore, accompanied me that day so that we could together thank members for their support. The evening we arrived, we made 4 home visits. The following day, October 18th, was the first trial session. It was the beginning of a court case that was to continue for more than 4 years, ending with a verdict of not guilty on all charges, but only because he fought it for all that time. Now, does everybody know how the judicial system in Japan works? You know, it's they really put you through the ringer. They want everybody to plead guilty. So you almost have to like jump through all kinds of hoops to say, I'm not guilty. It's easier for you to plead guilty, believe it or not. Yes, read a review, read somebody talking about the Japanese judicial system. Now that might be towards foreigners and not be towards locals necessarily, and I think that probably is a big part of it. But it's a difficult place to be legally if you're not from Japan. Let's put it that way. On the evening of the 18th, I went to Kobe, a short distance from Osaka. Seeing our energetic members there made me even more determined to fight my hardest. I wrote in my diary at the time, "The battle has finally begun. Know that now is the opportune time to advance in faith. My friends, advance resolutely toward the next victory. I, too, will fight." At the time, the Soka Gakkai was experiencing rapid growth throughout Japan, especially in Kansai. Though we were ridiculed and badmouthed as a gathering of the poor and sick, we regarded it as a badge of honor. We were proud that the Daishonen's teaching was to go out among the suffering and give them hope and courage to lead valuable lives. For it meant that it was a philosophy capable of genuinely benefiting humanity. Burning with a noble sense of mission as bodhisattvas of the earth, we actively reached out to others, engaging them in one-on-one, heart-to-heart dialogue to awaken them to their true worth and potential. Numerous struggles for human rights throughout the country have sought to rouse the people, weighed down by the burden of suffering and oppression, to boldly speak out and take action as the protagonists in building a better society, to rise up with invincible hope. To rise up with invincible hope. The established powers in Japan reacted with fear and resentment at the ascent of a new popular force in the form of the Soka Gakkai, and they attempted to suppress it. But the spirit of Nichiren Buddhism is to confront such challenges with the courage of the Lion King and triumph over them. Nichiren Daishonin called out to his followers to confidently unite with him in the cause of establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land, an undertaking he realized through courageous dialogue. He taught us that this shared struggle of mentor and disciple to communicate the truth of Buddhism is the driving force for opening the way for Kosen Rufu. The eternal and unchanging path to victory in this endeavor lies in speaking out and taking action, just as the Daishonin instructed, with his same spirit. In this chapter, we will study Reply to Yasaburo, in which Nichiren urges one of his disciples to proclaim the truth, just as he has done. So, what did that just talk about? What did that just talk about? What did President Ikeda lead into this lecture with? He talked about his personal experience of fighting injustice. All right? Right, that's exactly what he's talking about, trying to encourage you to do the same thing. All right? And he's saying that a gathering of the poor and the sick, we regarded it as a badge of honor. So they didn't feel shame in being who they were. Okay? And they transformed in front of everybody. Do understand, they didn't try and be somebody that they weren't. They were just who they were, and they gained the fortune that transformed their lives into becoming the leaders of society in Japan, not the dregs of Japan. Do understand that that's how the Soka Gakkai became so powerful in Japan. Why did it become so powerful? Because it infiltrated even into the higher echelons of society. How did that happen? Actual Soka members ascended into the higher echelons of society, starting out as a gathering of the poor and sick. Okay? They became the third freaking largest political party in the entire country. Okay? They became the most powerful individual influence in the entire country. All starting from a gathering of just a few dozen people with a conviction that something can be accomplished that seems impossible. So that's why it's important for us to always read everything we read with that spirit. Okay? So he's saying, numerous struggles for human rights throughout history. So President Keita says, we're another one of many struggles for human rights. That's what this entire function of trying to establish Kosen-Rufu is all about. Are the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra the only ones that benefit from the establishment of Kosen-Rufu? No. No. Everybody in the world benefits from that.
Right.
Okay? So it's important for you to understand that reality. That's what's behind this effort that we're making in our daily lives, and at the same time, that united reality is what's supposed to create this thing we're calling Kosen-Rufu, right? So it says, numerous struggles for human rights throughout history have sought to rouse the people. That's what this is doing right now, right? That's what this movement for Kosen-Rufu is trying to rouse the people to chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, to embrace the Buddhism of sowing, right? These people have all been weighed down by the burden of suffering and oppression, right? In the absence of the influence and power of your own life in the Buddha, as the Buddha, you're blown around by the 8 winds constantly. To boldly speak out and take action as the protagonist in building a better society. What's that say? To boldly speak out. It means you don't listen to bullshit and let it slide. Okay? You hear bullshit, you say, you know what? That sounds like bullshit to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think I understand it differently. Okay? He says, take action in building a better society. Boldly speak out. Take action as the protagonist. What are protagonists? What's protagonist? Who's a protagonist? What's the protagonist? What's protagonist mean?
Yourself. And dominate yourself.
The good guys. The good guys. The antagonists are the bad guys. The protagonists are the good guys. Okay? So, when we talk about protagonists, we're talking about the people that have the right and the correct view, the correct spirit, the actual power that exists, okay? So take action as the protagonists, as the people that are correct in building a better society, that have the right building blocks, that have the right philosophy for that to be accomplished. To rise up with invincible hope. What's that? That means you're not going to freaking stop until you get it done. And everybody you touch is going to catch that spirit from you. And even if you don't make it, eventually someone will. If you never give up, if you always bring people with you, even if you don't make it, someone will. Even if they don't make it, someone will. Even if the people they don't teach, someone will. And the numbers, if you ever did the math on this, are not crazy. We can do Kosen-Rufu in our lifetime. That's mathematically possible, frankly. Okay? So do you understand what I was trying to say, though? The established powers in Japan reacted with fear and resentment at the ascent of a new popular force in the form of the Soka Gakkai, and they attempted to suppress it. Did they succeed? No. No. The Soka Gakkai actually almost functioned as part of a government. All right? So they weren't defeated. That was a pretty big ask, too. From zero to being in control. Whoa. All right. But the spirit of Nichiren Buddhism is to confront such challenges. Not to look at it as, well, shit, this is impossible. What are we thinking? How in the hell are we going to do this? Instead, we answer ourselves with affirmatives, just as the Daisaku Ikeda is constantly, since I started reading, all he said is positive stuff. All he said is stuff that has to do with the future and you. Your life. Not so much his as somebody going, on 100. Okay? Or me going on 70. But some of you got a lot. A lot in front of you. All right. So, here we go. Praying for the disciples' growth, because that's the whole point, right? When you're in the 5th stage, what are you doing?
We help the others.
You're doing shakabuku,
Yeah.
right? So you're constantly praying for their growth, right? The disciples' growth is you and everybody else, right? So starting out on page 120, second column. I suggest you begin the religious debate with these words, and he's obviously talking about some sort of proposed, debate that's going to happen. He says, although I am an ignorant layman, among the teachings I have heard, I was especially impressed by the passage in the 2nd volume of the Lotus Sutra that reads, now this threefold world is all my domain. This sutra passage means that this country of Japan is the domain of Shakyamuni Buddha. Among all the Buddhas of the 10 directions, only Shakyamuni Buddha is endowed with these 3 virtues of sovereign teacher and parent. Therefore, even if all the people of the country of Japan were to serve Shakyamuni Buddha wholeheartedly, just as they now do Amida Buddha, if they were to place him side by side with another Buddha and treat him in the same manner as Amida, that would still be a grave error. Everybody understands that, right? Okay, so little is known about Yasaburo, the recipient of this letter, except that he was one of the Daishonin's followers. The reference to military battles in the letter's closing paragraph suggests that Yasaburo may have been a samurai. From Nichiren's words, it appears that Yasaburo was, for some reason, scheduled to engage in a religious debate with a priest of the Pure Land Nembutsu school, which worships Amida Buddha. Yasaburo had apparently reported this to the Daishonin, who was residing on Mount Minobu, and sought advice from him on what to say and how to conduct himself in the debate. Now, what does that tell us right away about Yasaburo? Even though we don't know shit about Yasaburo from what they can tell us about who Yasaburo was, though. But what do we know about Yasaburo? Yasaburo had already achieved, we don't know anything more about him than this Gosho, but he had achieved the 5th stage of practice because he's encouraging him as a bodhisattva. Listen to what he's saying here. Yasaburo had apparently reported this, that he's going to get in this debate to defend the Lotus Sutra against the Nembutsu. Okay? And he's reported this to the Daishonin and asked him for advice on how to conduct himself in this debate. So what does that say? He's taking on a true word believer to defend the Lotus Sutra and the Daishonin's teaching of the Lotus Sutra. All right? So he says, sought advice on what to say and how to conduct himself in the debate. This letter is the Daishonin's response. Nichiren also takes into account the fact that the planned debate might lead Yasaburo to be summoned before the local steward to explain himself. All right, because he's going to defend the Buddhism of sowing, which has now been for the first time ever heard of. No one's ever heard of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo prior to Nichiren. Okay, so Yasaburo, when he's going out talking about the Lotus Sutra and talking about the tie-in to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, there is no existing understanding of that. All right? So, reply to Yasaburo was written in August of 1277, first paragraph of page 121. Reply to Yasaburo was written in August 1277, 3 years after Nichiren Daishonin took up residence on Mount Minobu. It was a time when many of his leading disciples, including Shijo Kingo, the Ikegami brothers, and Nanjo Tokimitsu, were facing major persecutions. Nichiren composed the workings of Brahma and Chakra, which was what we read last week, which we studied in the previous chapter, earlier that same year, in May 1277. In it, he offered Nanjo Tokimitsu, who was undergoing various forms of persecution from those around him. Pardon me.
Guidance.
In it, he offered Nanja Tokimitsu, who, pardon me. In it, he offered Nanjo Tokimitsu, who was undergoing various forms of Okay. Excuse me. I'm gonna have. I don't know why I can't get to the bottom of this here. Nichiren composed the workings of. Pardon me. Nichiren composed the workings of Brahma and Chakra, which we studied in the previous chapter. Earlier that same
year.
No, earlier that same year, in May 1277. In it, he offered he offered Nanjo Sukemitsu. Wow. Nichiren composed the workings of Brahma and Chakra, which we studied in the previous chapter earlier that same year, in May 1277. In it, he offered Nanjo Tokimitsu, who was undergoing various forms of persecution from those around him, guidance for leading a victorious life. In June 1277, Nichiren Shijo Kingo was ordered by his lord to discard his faith in the Lotus Sutra, the latter having been swayed by the false rumors of Kingo's jealous fellow samurai. The Daishonin immediately composed the letters of petition from Yorimoto on King's behalf to address this misunderstanding and clarify the truth. In the same year, the Daishonin also wrote letter to Shimoyama as a petition to a feudal lord on behalf of a follower known as Inaba Bo, who was being persecuted because he had taken faith in the Lotus Sutra. Given the difficult circumstances that many of Nichiren's followers were facing at this time, the challenge confronting Yasaburo was not merely an individual matter. Each of their struggles unmistakably displayed the onslaughts of the three obstacles and four devils and the three powerful enemies, which were triggered by the advance of Kosarufu. With this development, it could be said the time had come for Nichiren's disciples to stand up and fight alongside him. In this letter, he wholeheartedly encourages one lay believer and encourages him to stand up as a genuine disciple and take courageous action for the sake of Buddhism. Just as he has, here we can see the foundation for the Daishonin's version of the mentor-disciple relationship as one of shared struggle. So does everybody understand what he was basically saying there? He's basically urging him to behave as a disciple of the original teacher. Okay? And here he's qualifying that as being Shakyamuni, but it's in reality what he's propagating, Yasaburo, is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Therefore, the teacher in question actually is Nichiren. He says, the threefold world is the Buddha's domain. At the start of this letter, At the start of the letter, Nichiren Daishonin suggests that Yasaburo say in the debate, although I am an ignorant layman, among the teachings I have heard, I was especially impressed by the passage in the second volume of the Lotus Sutra that reads, now this threefold world is all my domain. The phrase, now this threefold world is all my domain, is from the Simile parable, the Lotus Sutra's third chapter. The passage reads in full. But now this threefold world is all my domain, and the living beings in it are all my children. Now this place is beset by many pains and trials. I am the only person who can rescue and protect others. After explaining that this passage means that this country of Japan is the domain of Shakyamuni Buddha, he writes, in addition to the fact that all the gods and the people from the ruler of the nation on down dwell within this realm, he is the Buddha to whom we living beings are greatly indebted for three reasons. First, he is our sovereign. Second, he is our teacher. And third, he is our father. He then goes on to affirm that among all the Buddhas of the worlds of the 10 directions, only Shakyamuni has the mission of teaching and guiding us, the living beings of this Sahe world. Even if the people of Japan were to show the same reverence and respect for Shakyamuni Buddha as they did toward the extremely popular Amida Buddha, he notes they would still be committing a grave error by putting the Buddha of this Sahe world, Shakyamuni, on the same level as the Buddha of another world, Amida of the pure land of perfect, or the land of perfect bliss, and revering both equally. Everybody understands the point, right? What's the point? How do we know about the teachings of Buddhism? Shakyamuni, right? Okay, so when we know about other, like Amida, we know about other gods. We only know them by virtue of them having been revealed to us through the teachings of Shakyamuni's Buddhism, right? Okay, so that's really what he's referring to. And he says, pardon me, the Buddhist clergy in Japan are particularly at fault, he continues, because though they entered the priesthood to become disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha, they cast aside this fundamental teacher and his supreme teaching of the Lotus Sutra, which Shakyamuni declares as his supreme teaching, the Lotus Sutra, right? They behave as though they were disciples of Amida Buddha, he says, by actively encouraging people to worship this Buddha and chant Amida Buddha's name. This constitutes the profoundly evil act of causing people to slander the law and fall into the hell of incessant suffering. It's the act of leading people to mistake the secondary, Amida, for the primary, Shakyamuni, to mistake the leaves and branches for the root, as it were. That is why the Daishonin sternly declares they are evildoers who only resemble virtuous people. And among evildoers, they are the worst of the most terrible slanderers and ichkantikas, or persons of incorrigible disbelief. In all Japudvipa, the entire nation, such evildoers, he says, are worse than such great villains as Devadatta. Whew, that's a big statement. Who became enemies of Shakyamuni Buddha during his lifetime. Nichiren warns that one mustn't mistake one's proper parent, teacher, and sovereign to whom one owes everything, would have undoubtedly resonated with Yasaburo, who we surmise was a samurai, dedicated to faithfully serving his feudal lord and ready to lay down his life for him. If Yasaburo were to speak just as Nichiren instructed, whether in his debate with the Nimbutsu priest or if summoned before the steward, he would be able to clearly refute their fundamental error of giving preeminence to Amida Buddha. Okay? And I know I'm going a little short, but I don't want to get so far into this that next week there's nothing to cover to finish it, and I won't get it all done tonight. So what I do want to, though, clarify is, did you understand where this is going, where it's headed, in terms of what the message of this Gosho is?
Be the correct teacher.
Exactly. Be the correct teacher. And understand that it all then, once you become a correct teacher, then it all depends on you. Every correct teacher has already made the determination and taken the vow. I'll do it by myself. Okay? That's why they can have the kind of faith that leads other people to faith. All right? In the absence of that kind of faith, they can't demonstrate the power of faith or attract others to faith. That's why they have the lives that they have. That's why they have the challenges that they have. Okay? Because they karmically have the faith to win, to not be defeated, to leave an example of victory. Right? That's very, very important. Everybody needs to know that they can overcome anything, and that's not just boilerplate, that's not just words, that there's nothing that can't be resolved. And you, as the person that's trying to lead them, have to be a living example of that reality.
Mhm.
You know, it's got to be expressed at least in your attitude towards life and your outlook towards what you're involved in. If you refer to it theoretically, you just defeated the reality of what it is, really. Okay? Do you follow where I'm coming from? All right, so we'll finish this Go Show next week, continuing from page 123. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
See you
you.
then.
Thank you.